ThermalRight strikes again, this time with the TL-S12-S. This was a 3-pack. I got this fan by accident because they were misplaced in an order, and I got them. Anyways, it should be basically the same as the regular S12, just this time with an illuminated blade, so we're going to find that out in this video review. So let's hop into it and see what we learn. First, the spec information: bog standard 120mm class fan, fluid dynamic bearing, noise, and everything else. Alright, here we are, taking a look at the RGB of the TL-S12-S. So I previously liked the TL-S12 regular, which doesn't have the illuminated central fan, as it's a little bit more subtle in its RGB, while this gives you more of that forward-facing blam, or however you want to call it. And, well, the RGB looks pretty good. It has 8 inner LED lights, which is a pretty good amount. A lot of cheaper fans will have like 6, 8 is what I'm calling like the middle tier, and anything more than that is like higher tier fans. Sorry, my focus is really having a hard time with this fan. Keeping itself in. And of course the outer lighting ring looks, well, pretty good. If we come around to the back, not nearly as sharp as, the front, but there's only 3 struts, doesn't obstruct the view too bad overall. So overall, I call the back kind of a win. It's certainly appealing, and I think they have reverse blade versions of these fans. I hope to be able to acquire them because I have been trying to test more of these reverse blade fans that are coming onto the market to really know how much performance difference between there is regular fans and, well, reverse blades. As I stop the fan, here we go. The fan blades are fairly unremarkable. They're just smooth. The edge distance between the blade and the housing is actually fairly tight, which is great to see. It's one of the reasons why, despite the fan's low RPM, it's actually fairly efficient overall in terms of its thrust. Now, one weird thing with this fan is it has this cable sticking out the side. I just assume that it's extra power feeding into the RGB, but it's not very attractive, but you can also easily hide it. It's just one of those weird things I've noticed on this fan. It's got a little bit of rubber padding around the edges, but other than that, the design is pretty clean and basic. Before we get into the data, I would like to thank Mint Mobile for being today's video partner. Thanks to Mint Mobile's wireless plans, it is possible to not only switch away from big, expensive mobile companies, but to also have a quality, affordable plan for me and my family. Mint Mobile's premium wireless plan starts at just $15 a month for a 3-month plan. I can get high-speed data and unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network. I can bring my own phone along and my current phone number, so you don't need to memorize a new phone number, something I have always found difficult. Switching to Mint is super easy thanks to digital eSIM cards, which most phones have. You can sign up and activate immediately right from your own phone from the comfort of your own home. If your phone doesn't have a digital eSIM card, Mint will ship you a new SIM card free of charge. If you're interested in learning more about Mint Mobile and switching, visit my link or by clicking the link in the video description down below. The first series of tests is in the case simulation test. This tries to simulate a computer case in more or less an average sense by taking it at a couple key measurement locations. This does assume an air-cooled type system. If you're doing radiators and stuff like that, the airflow patterns tend to be a little bit different. But in terms of how the case fans will behave, this is what we specifically want to look at. But again, it's usually most inclined towards air-cooled type systems. So we got the 6 mark, which is like a small form factor case, still a front-to-back airflow type design, or putting fans at the bottom of your computer case and blowing them up towards your GPU. Then the 9-inch mark is a compact tower, something that can hold a standard ATX motherboard, but not a lot of extra room there. The 11-inch mark would be your standard mid-tower cases, think something that can hold 320mm class fans. And then the truly large tower is at 14.5 inches, and that would be like having 340mm class fans. And these lengths are the distance from the fans at the front to where the CPU socket is approximately on average in most of these designs. So depending on what size computer case you were shopping for is the data point you want to specifically look at. Now, we need something to compare against, and I have a standardized control fan that I use in all of my testing. It is based 3 parts A12X5 to 1 part A14, blending the 2 fans' data together to create a basically a quote perfect fan. It's not really perfect, but it creates a baseline to test everything against. And at noise normalized results, the S12 does defeat it. So it's a little bit better across many of the computer case sizes until you get to bigger ones, and then it doesn't matter as much. At 100% PWM fan signaling, they line up very, very closely, interestingly enough. Mind, the TL-S12 is a little bit underneath, it's no surprise it's spinning at a pretty significant amount lower than it. When we compare against other fans, noise normalized results, and my 10.5 decibel reading, the TL-S12-S is sitting right here in the middle of the pack. Actually, it's in a very good position overall. If you're looking for something interesting, right here in this blue diamond is the first TL-S12 that I reviewed, and it does quite a bit better. So this is utilizing like bearing and air noise going through it. So it could be that I just got a worse sample, or that one I ended up getting a golden sample. It's really hard to know, but it gives us a spectrum for some variance between the two fans. Or maybe it's just because the materials that are made out of the fan to make it translucent changes properties a little bit. It's hard to know exactly which is going on. Putting things into bar graph form at the 10.5 decibel mark, we got the S12S and we have the S12W, both highlighted. And somewhat similar results. The S12S, the specific one for this review, is in the upper part of the graph, so that is a great position for it to be in. I'm bumping things up to my 17.5 decibel reading, so this is a new noise normalized result. And it is towards the bottom end of these upper fans. Still a very good result, and at larger cases, it is basically middle of these upper end solid grouping of fans, so I'd call it a good fan nonetheless. If you're looking for the original S12, it's sitting just a little bit above it. This purple line with the X ends up overall, on average, slightly better than it. Looking at it in bar graph form, at the 6 and the 11-inch marks, you can see the variance between the two fans. Again, this is noise normalized. Taking a look at things at a specific RPM, so 800 RPM, the S12S versus the S12W, the original S12 does outperform ever so slightly, just by a couple decimal points of meter per second of airflow. But that's all that separates the best from, well, maybe not the worst, but the best from the kind of the average ones on this particular graph. So it's definitely a great position for it to be in. Moving things up to 1,500 RPM, and the S12S continues its position more or less in the middle of the graph, just a hair behind the original S12, but definitely in a great position to be in, beating out the TLB12. The S12S is this green line. I guess I mixed up which one I was highlighting, while the S12 original that I tested is this yellow line, and they end up very closely lined up, but following the trend for this previous graph, the S12S is just trailing it ever so slightly. Taking a look at it in a different way, this time we're taking a look at airspeed versus noise level in decibels, and this is taken at the 9-inch mark, and the S12S is doing pretty well. Original S12 is my king pick here, but the S12S is certainly a solid pick when comparing it against other fans. Maybe not the smoothest transitions and lines compared to some of the other ones, but definitely a solid pick. Looking at the data in just a slightly different way, this time in SON. SON basically compacts noise levels that are quieter and stretches out noise levels as they get louder, so they extend off here to the right side a bit more. And the S12 doesn't get particularly noisy simply because it doesn't spin that fast, so it doesn't have the opportunity to get noisy. So in its performance realm, it does really quite well. So it would be an excellent pick, assuming you're not running a incredibly hot system. Then you might need more airflow, unless you can like really stack your computer case with plenty of airflow cycling in and out with a number of these fans. Now we're looking at performance on the CPU air cooler. The cooler of choice is the Noctua U12A. And on the left side here, we have airspeed versus RPM. This is basically a blade efficiency. It's how good is this blade design compared to my blended control fan. And it lines up fairly closely. So that is, well, a good thing. It does trail it ever so slightly, but not too far off of it. So I'd say its blade design is very effective. In terms of its noise efficiency, it is trailing my control fan a bit, but it's not too far off at lower RPM airspeeds. But as things get cranked up more, it tends to fall away a little bit more, so maybe not as strong a choice in that realm. And now validation for my radiator versus my air cooler. I ran the air through it. This isn't saying that the cooling potential between the two devices is the same. This is saying that the resistance to airflow, in theory, is similar. This is one of the few tests where I found there to be a larger difference between the air cooler and the radiator. In most other fans, they line up near on identically. This is the only one where there's a bit more of a separation between the two, where the radiator is actually easier for it to blow air through, which is kind of funny because you would think the radiator would be, the hard one, right? But going back into the actual data, so we have noise normalized results in meters per second. My system, as well as estimation for wattages, is over there in the key. And the S12S trails behind the original S12 ever so slightly, though they have the same RPM. Again, this is at noise normalized values, where the noise normalized value in red is my 10.5 decibel mark, and the noise normalized value in blue is my 17.5, rounded in this case. And they line up very, very closely, just with the regular S12 beating it ever so slightly, where you can see it's in the line of other great fans, like the Wonder Tornado, the Tough Fan 12, TLK12 is in there, as well as a bunch of other ones. But they miss out on the top echelon of fans, so they're not quite hitting that best of the best. Viewer suggestion, locking in those RPMs and just seeing how it does. I have my weighing factor over here on the side, if you're wondering how these fans are weighted, which is why something like the Iceberg Thermal Extra is rated so high, but it is not ranked first because its noise level is screaming loud compared to the other fans around it, so that drops its position back quite a ways. The S12s are ranked towards the bottom of this graph at 800 RPM. It's just not where they're particularly effective. I don't think that they're gripping the air quite strong enough to generate that pressure. By the time we hit 1,500 RPM, they look a little bit better, but the TLS12S is trailing behind, actually pretty significantly. I would expect more out of it. And at 100% PWM fan signaling, well, the two fans once again line up right next to each other. And similar noise levels, but the -S series, so the bigger glow, does end up being a bit noisier at the similar RPM than the original S12. And again, this graph, take it with a grain of salt. This is at 100% PWM fan signaling, so it's maximum RPM. These are only spinning at 1,500 RPM. Most of the other fans on here are spinning at 2,000 plus. It's just to give an idea of how these fans actually perform when compared to what really good fans, like if you're really trying to push the limits of your CPU, can do with maximum airflow. And now airspeed versus noise. The S12S is sitting in the middle of the pack, like middle, bog standard middle. It's fine. Take a look at the same thing, but this time in Sone. Again, it's telling us the same story. It's fine. It's not going to win any awards. It's not the echelon best of the best. It doesn't get high enough RPM, but in its speed spectrum, it's doing really quite well. Now we're on to CFM. CFM is you put a fan, you got a tube, you blow air down the tube, and you take an airspeed measurement. It isn't particularly useful, in my opinion, for computer case airflow because it hides the fact that the fan has a tendency to shoot air off to the sides, but I've included it because many other reviewers do a similar type test, and I wanted to include that data for all of you. At this time, I'd also like to note I am building this channel up towards a revision 3 of my overall testing methodology, where I'd have better testing equipment, better testing apparatuses to generate even more and even cleaner data, but I can't get there without help from viewers like you. Just hitting subscribe does go a really long way in helping support this channel, but becoming a YouTube member or Patreon takes it to the next level and helping support this channel. I know that it's a hard thing to ask. I'm a random person on the internet, but if you like the data I'm generating and you're finding it useful, please think about helping support this channel. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. So the first graph here for CFM is CFM versus RPM blade efficiency, and they line up perfectly in line with each other, which makes a lot of sense because of just what I just described a hot minute ago. Now noise efficiency, decibel versus CFM, we're seeing a very similar result to what we saw for the air cooler, so I'm not going to rehash that. Noise normalized CFM, the S12 versus the S12S, similar positioning, both in pretty good positions. Not a lot of change going on here from previous tests we saw. They're doing perfectly fine. At 100% PWM fan signaling, it's no surprise. Once again, it's just to show the stark difference between 1,500 RPM fans to really high performing ones. Their noise levels actually aren't that bad considering their RPM, and they're beating out some other fans that actually spin a little bit slower than it that I listed on here. So their noise levels are actually just fine and dandy, and their airspeed that they're able to push makes a lot of sense given their RPM. Then we have CFM versus that decibel rating, bottom middle of the pack, perfectly adequate position for them to be in. Now we have a value proposition. This was a triple pack for $15, so that's approximately $5 per fan. Do note that sales do happen and prices do fluctuate. And with tariffs, who knows what will happen to the prices. But this is what they were at time of creating this review. So the TL-S12-S is at the 6 and the 11-inch mark a really good value. Matter of fact, at the 11-inch mark, it is, at time of making this, the best value fan that I had tested to that point. It beats out the TL-S12, which was the best that I tested at that point. So if you like the RGB lighting in that hub for the fan area, it may be an excellent choice for a value case fan. Now, I want to reiterate a point. Value proposition isn't performance. It is performance per dollar. So a fan that is cheap enough, even has terrible airflow, will rank really well in these graphs. While a fan that might have the best airflow, but is too expensive, is going to rank really badly. It is up to you to determine which fan best suits your needs within your price range. I'm just presenting the data for you. CFM testing, the TL-S12-S, chart topper once again. It's beating out a lot of the other fans that had been, well, in first place up till this point. So it is an excellent value pick. And in terms of its CPU cooler performance, it once again is towards the top and is an excellent choice, but it is not the top pick. Now, if you're joining me as a TLDR from the very beginning of the video to jumping to the end, this is for you. And if you made it all the way to the end, this is sort of a brief summary of what we're generally finding about this fan. So first, in CPU cooler, low wattage. So for the coolers, it's assuming that whatever cooler you're just going to slap these to is capable of handling the thermal load. But for a CPU cooler and low wattage, it's an average performer. There's its rank. Its value is great, which is the best that I can call it. In terms of its capability for high wattage CPUs, I'd also call it average. There's its ranking, and its value is also great. For small, compact computers, its performance is also great. There's its ranking and its value. And for mid to large size, it's also great, and its value is great. So overall, it's a fantastic value fan, and overall does either average for coolers or is a great fan for computer cases. And that brings us to the end of the video. This is raw data. The raw data does belong to me and this channel. You may use it for your own personal use. Do not use it for anything for your own monetization. If you're looking for ways to support this channel, I have a Patreon and YouTube memberships, the two higher tiers of which gain access to my raw data Excel spreadsheets. You do need to ask and provide an email address for me to send it to you. We can work that part out. This whole thing is new for me, but I know that that has been a request. I know that being able to give money to a random YouTuber on the internet may not be possible for all of you because I know times are hard. But just hitting subscribe, throwing a like does help support this channel. It helps it gain traction, more visibility. I'm always trying to improve this channel. If you see mistakes, suggestions, whatever improvements, I'm willing to look into it and see what I can do. And if you have any fans that you'd like me to test in the future, please think about leaving in the comment section down below. Right now I've got a huge backlog that I tested over the winter, so I'm going to be working through those, but they'll be in my next cycle of fans. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. Have a great day, and I hope to see you next time here on Computer Tech and More.